Okay, welcome to the section of BD Playbook on constructing your pitch. Now, there's a lot of things that go into making a great pitch, and we're going to go into each one of these in detail, but real quick, just to go through them, there's building the deck, writing out your pitch, outlining potential concerns, and then understanding how you can disarm them and writing those into your script, adding stories, adding questions, adding intentional pausing, and practicing. All right, let's dive in. Some rules of thumb on your deck. Number one, you want to keep it short and sweet. I aim for around 12 slides or less. The more straightforward and to the point, the better. You don't want to bombard somebody with too much information or they'll forget the key points of the deck. Number two, aesthetic is important. Potential partners are going to judge the quality of your company and relationship with how you present yourself, and that includes the deck as well as the words that come out of your mouth. If you need to pay a designer, it's absolutely worth the investment, considering the slightest difference in perception could mean the difference between getting a second meeting and not getting a second meeting, which ultimately might result in a deal that changes your business. Number three, limit text. And the reason that you don't want to have too much text is you want them listening to you instead of reading. Now, you might be looking at this presentation saying, Scott, this is so text heavy. Well, I intentionally made this text heavy so that everyone who doesn't necessarily listen to the audio and just uses the PowerPoints or slide shares would be able to understand the most important points. But when you're pitching a prospective partner and it's a 12-slide PowerPoint or deck, you want them to just focus on the big picture and visualizing what is possible, which is why limiting text is a best practice. Okay, right now let's go through my favorite framework for constructing a deck. At a high level, basically it includes these elements: company background, the state of the universe in your industry or relative to this relationship, an outline of your solution, specific examples, as well as a summary and next steps. Now we're going to go through each one of these very specifically with examples of exactly what I mean, but at a high level, this is the shell of how I like to pitch my product. Okay, so first slide is the company background. What you see in front of you is the background slide of the single platform pitch deck. Now granted, this is when we were a little bit farther along than just started, but the same principles apply. So things you might want to include in the background of your company slide: your vision. So why does this company exist? For us, we wanted to create a one-stop shop for local businesses to expand their storefront everywhere consumers were making decisions online. You could include a little bit about the story. So when you were founded, and if you have a prominent founder like Single Platform did in Wiley Sorelli, include that information because it is additive to your ability to be taken seriously. Same with the team. Having 120 team members makes us look good, and our reach of over 500,000 merchants was an excellent proof point. Now, we actually got acquired when we were using this pitch deck. So I made sure to include that because, again, when you're part of a public company, that is an excellent proof point to demonstrate credibility when you're entering a new vertical, if somebody's never heard of you, and even including things like press mentions with logos that somebody will recognize is an excellent thing to do because it just kind of validates your significance as a company. Okay, so this is one slide. After that, I think a great section to include is a story of where the state of the world is for a given prospect, which kind of sets up your solution and why you created it. So for us, there was a study done by AT&T Interactive, which is yellowpages.com, that the number one thing that people search for when choosing a dining destination was the menus. 63% of people indicated that was the most important thing they were looking for when they were searching for this information online. The interesting thing was that despite this importance, across all of these publishers, just a year ago, Yellow Pages, Google, TripAdvisor, all of these places that people were trying to make a dining decision, that information didn't exist on those websites. And that's why we created Single Platform, to give publishers the most valuable information while letting a local business expand their storefront on places that people were searching for them online. See how this is kind of a state of the world where it's almost irony if you can portray that. So there was this thing, and for some reason this didn't exist, and that's why we created what we did. Basically, it's setting the table for you to present your solution. So third element is a brief description of your solution, which again was just set up by the story of the state of the world and highlighted by its benefits for that particular prospect. So here's the next slide that we'd present after going through the state of the world. So this is why we created Single Platform, a one-stop shop for a local business to enter in all of their information, so their menus, hours, locations, prices, and more, and we would syndicate that out to everywhere consumers were making decisions online. So places like Yahoo, Google, Urban Spoon, these are all people that were taking this information from us. And the most amazing thing is that when adding this information on their site, across our publisher network, the average partner saw an additional 3 to 4 minutes of time on site. And again, the reason that this occurred is because this is the most important information that consumers are looking for when trying to make that dining decision. So these past two slides are an example of how you transition from the state of the world to your solution highlighted by its specific benefits. If you don't have those relevant proof points, this is where you can position information like a case study, or maybe the results of a pilot program that you've done, or maybe even proposition what the benefits would be if you were to do a pilot. After you've provided a brief description of your solution and highlighted the benefits, then you transition into specific examples if you have them, highlighted by the benefits that those partners saw. So an example of this is the before and after with and without Single Platform. So without Single Platform, this Yellow Pages site was pretty much just a name, address, and phone number. If I wanted to figure out where I was going out to dinner with my girlfriend, I'd have no idea what this place actually serves, thus I'd probably have to navigate off their site and go to the specific restaurant's website. However, after implementing the Single Platform API, all of that rich information about what they served and how much it cost was exactly right there within the framework of their site. So I never had to leave yellowpages.com. And it wasn't only within the website, but on the mobile app as well, which was pretty amazing. And the most amazing thing is that since adding menus, Yellow Pages actually doubled the amount of restaurant phone calls within app, which is just an amazing sign of increased engagement. So this is an example of, after presenting the solution, providing specific examples and then the benefits that that example partner that you brought up experience. Now, what happens if you don't have examples? Well, here's the instance where you basically show what something would be like and describe the examples hypothetically. So if you recall this from the cold emailing section, before we were working with fitness centers, we had the idea of basically enabling them to display all of their classes and amenities throughout our publisher network. And so when I was pitching Equinox, I would say something like, yeah, a Single Platform is great. You're able to see some photos, the name, address, and phone number, but what people really want to know is, what are the classes and amenities here, and are they in alignment with what I actually want to do at the gym? Because a lot of people just go to the gym for classes. Well, with Single Platform, you have the ability to display your class schedule and amenities on all of the sites that consumers are making decisions about where they want to go to the gym. And when somebody clicks this button, they can see that entire suite of amazing classes that are offered at every single location. So this is just an example of presenting the hypothetical, if we work together, this is the awesome thing that would come out of that relationship. And again, I created this simply using custom HTML via Firebug and inspect element within Google Chrome. Okay, after you present some specific examples or hypothetical examples, you want to go into the closing summary and next steps. Here's an example from the Single Platform deck. So we have a summary of the tech, which is simple integration via API or JavaScript widget, content, so the actual summary of what they'll be getting with the API, And then next steps, in order to get access, we need our boilerplate agreement signed in return. And that's pretty much it. I mean, this is a simple, straightforward, to-the-point deck that honestly is really enhanced by the actual words and pitching throughout it. But the basic idea is you just want to paint the picture here of where the world was, why you created the solution, its benefits, as well as all the things that they're going to receive by working with you. So here's some frequently asked questions when you show a deck like this. Well, what if I don't have the referenceable logos that you have? Well, you have three options. You can ask friends if you can use their logo. You can replace a logo with a giant customer quote from a lesser known prospect or partner or whoever it is. Or you could just not include that slide, but mention the people that you're likely to work with. And there's a way to do this that's very important, because the last thing you want to do is lie about who you're working with. Again, you must practice 100% honesty at all times. So here's what not to do. Say that you're already working with somebody if you haven't finalized a deal. It's just dishonest and signals the wrong thing. And remember, you want these to be long-term, fruitful relationships with partners. A better approach to doing this is basically using an indirect statement that implies a relationship exists. So something like, yeah, one of the things that Google loves about us is that every customer gets a dedicated account manager, or whoever that potential partner is. So saying something like, one of the things that somebody loves about us is an indirect statement that implies that you either have a relationship with that partner or have been talking to them. And that type of statement signals the fact that there is social proof out there, whether in the form of existing relationships or conversations. And again, you don't have to have the logo slide to say something like this. Another deck frequently asked question: what if I don't have example integrations? Well, we went over this before, but very simply, you just want to paint the picture with Photoshop, with custom HTML. And here's an example, again, of how I did that when pitching Equinox. What if I don't have stats? There's two options. One, go out and create a case study to get them. And again, sometimes this requires giving away the house to a partner or asking a friend just to get those initial verifiable results that you can create a case study with. The second option is searching for an industry report that has stats that imply the value of your solution. So something like this Yellow Pages study that I brought up before, where 63% of users are searching for the menu, which is more than any other piece of information out there when making a dining decision, is an amazing example of basically leveraging an existing study that's out there that proves the value of your solution, or potential value of your solution, if you haven't done any partnerships yet. Let's talk about what you do after you build the deck. The next step is to write a script for your pitch using the deck as a guide. Why write out a script? Well, for a couple reasons. First, it helps you uncover any holes in the communication. So even though you have all of these slides that allude to all these great things, you want to make sure you cover all your bases and showcase all the most valuable parts of why somebody might want to work with you. And physically writing out a script helps you uncover these. Additionally, you'll eventually want to go from the script the first couple times, or at least have it handy so that you're communicating effectively and clearly. When I say write a script, I mean literally write out exactly what you think you should say for every single slide, word by word. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be a good guideline that your pitch is going to be tailored from. I use Google Docs to write out my scripts, but you can use any word processor out there like Microsoft Word, whatever it may be. Okay, after you've written out your script, the next step is to outline potential concerns that your partner might have. And after you do these, you want to add different statements that disarm these concerns into the script. So, first step in this process is just thinking about and writing out all the reasons why somebody would say that they don't want to do this relationship or they might not want to work with you. Some examples might be, who are your competitors and how do you match up? Maybe you don't match up as well as your competitors. How much time is required to implement your solution? It's a common concern that you'll see. Do you offer dedicated customer service? Because that's really important to us. Why is it so expensive? Once you understand these potential points of contention or concerns, you want to put in statements that disarm them so they don't even come up into conversation during or after you've pitched. You also want to have rebuttals prepared and even practice and write them out so that you can address them with confidence when they come up in a pitch. Again, once you've defined the concerns, the next step is intentionally placing statements that disarm them throughout the pitch. So let's look at a statement that disarms the existence of competitors. We've quickly become the industry standard for online menu syndication or social media marketing, whatever it is. At this point, if we haven't done a deal with you, we're probably talking to you. So when you say something like this, it signals to somebody else that if their competitors are out there, they probably aren't important, which means that there's a less likelihood this person will ask about competitors after or during the pitch. Another example, disarming statement. This time, disarming the potential concern that it takes long to implement. One of the things that all of our clients love about us is how fast and easy implementation is. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the word seamless over the past month. So again, a statement like this completely obliterates the concern that something takes long to implement. Now they might still bring this up, but at least you've given yourself a chance to circumvent this question entirely. And again, the less concerning questions at the end of a pitch, the better, even when you can address all rebuttals effectively. After you've added some disarming statements around potential concerns to your script, the next thing you want to add is stories. Stories? Why stories? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, stories humanize yourself. They make people like you more. I intentionally go as far as making fun of myself in stories just to engender rapport and disarm any anxiety around our relationship. When you tell stories and do things like make fun of yourself, you make yourself vulnerable, which is just generally an endearing thing to do because it signals to somebody else that you feel comfortable enough with them to act this way. And remember, the more somebody likes you, the greater likelihood that they're going to do something for you. Another reason to tell stories is it can be a more effective way to communicate something that's easier to understand. When you're talking about high-level concepts, or even things that are technical, sometimes just sharing a story more effectively communicates the value proposition and why somebody might want to work with you. Along the same lines, stories provide enhanced recall. So when this person goes to pitch internally, it's easier for them to maybe remember a story that explicitly outlines the benefits of your solution than technical details or things that aren't necessarily as emotional and easy to recall as a story is. So when do you insert a story into a pitch? I think the best time to insert stories are when describing a relatable pain that person might have. Again, because you want to try to inject something that resonates on an emotional level. So this story can be tied directly to your product or solution, or it can just be tangentially related to really emphasize somebody's pain. An example story that I used to tell when I was pitching the single platform API was the difficulty I'd have finding a date spot that accommodated my girlfriend's eating habits. So again, menus are the number one thing that diners look for online, yet for some reason, they're not on any of the most popular sites, or at least they weren't until we came along. So I used to say something like, yeah, it's honestly, it's a pain that I feel in my own life because the girl I'm dating is what seems like a vegetarian every other week. And whenever I choose a restaurant, it's always such a pain to go to the restaurant's website that's blasting crazy flash music at me. So I usually just end up foregoing looking at the menu, thinking that they have vegetarian options. And when we get there, it turns out the only thing she can get is actually a Caesar salad, which is super frustrating for me because she's unhappy with me. Now, this is just a very simple example that demonstrates how I've now humanized the fact that this website doesn't have menus and it's causing pain in a user's life. It's causing pain in my life. And now all of a sudden, when this person goes back in to tell their boss about why they should maybe have menus, he might say, you know, it honestly isn't very important. There's people that are using our service out there that ultimately are having a bad experience in the real world because we don't have this particular thing that they're looking for. Another example of a story, just that is non-single platform specific, would be a tool that maybe allowed restaurants to manage the content on their website. So maybe like a website builder. So let's say that you were trying to pitch your website builder and why somebody might need a tool to help update their website without any technical means. You might want to say something like, oh, that's why we decided to build a tool to help restaurants easily manage their websites. My friend's parents who owned a restaurant had their next door neighbor's little brother build their website, like many people do. Of course, he moved away and now they can't update anything on their site, including removing the weird music that blasts every time you go on it. I didn't realize how bad it was until I went on at work and my office mates asked me why I was listening to folk music. It's an Italian restaurant. So stories like this are things that everybody can relate to that make you more likable. So everybody can relate to the terrible restaurant website with weird music that is out of date, that for some reason or whatever never changes. And again, maybe the reason it never changes is because your friend's next door neighbor built it and moved away, just like we had in the story. The bottom line is that injecting these type of stories into your pitch disarms prospects because you show vulnerability, maybe you get them to laugh, and it also does things like effectively communicates the value proposition of your service while enhancing recall when they go to describe it internally. Okay, after you've added stories, time to add some questions within the pitch script. You want to be asking questions mainly because you constantly want to be arming yourself with as much information and understanding of your prospect as possible. The more information you have, the better you will be able to frame and position your solution to answer their problems. Another good thing about questions is they break up the pitch. If you're just constantly pitching without any back and forth dialogue, it seems kind of like a monologue, and that isn't how a pitch should feel. It should feel more conversational than this, and questions are a great way to essentially move it more towards a conversation. Where do you put questions? The first place you want to put questions are in the beginning of the call, and these questions should be based around building rapport. So things like, so where are you calling from? Oh yeah, how's the weather out there? Yeah, I was actually there last year, if you were there last year, and boy, I couldn't believe how hot it was, or whatever, type of small talk you want to make. Or you might be able to say something like, if you got an introduction, we got connected through Steve. How do you know Steve? Bottom line is the initial questions you want to ask should be about building rapport, light banner, just kind of disarming any anxiety around the conversation by having some small talk. After you have a couple rapport building questions, you want to dive into just 1 to 2 more relevant business questions. And we touched on these briefly before, but just real quick again. These might be things like, so how long have you been with the company? What types of things are you responsible for there? How much do you know about our company, or how did you hear about us? If they know exactly who you are and what you do, then you might want to ask them something like, oh, that's great. Just out of curiosity, how are you guys currently approaching accomplishing whatever your company helps with? If they don't know anything about your company, then you might want to just proceed right into the pit and say, okay, great. Well, I'm happy that I have the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what we do and how we help companies like yours. After you've done that, and you're going to go into the pitch, and then what you want to do is throughout the script and deck, you want to just sprinkle additional questions where appropriate. And again, this breaks up the monologue and as well as allows you an opportunity just to get some more valuable information. So I call these sprinkles, and question sprinkles are just very simple questions throughout the deck. So things like, is mobile a focus for you right now? You might ask that after showing a mobile integration. Or maybe you just describe the functionality and ease of your API, and maybe you could say something like, Just out of curiosity, is an API something that you guys have ever thought about building out? Now, the one caveat with questions is you don't want to ask too many. And the reason for this is you don't want it to seem like an interrogation. Rapport is best built over a dialogue, and this is why you want to space questions out. A few in the beginning, a few about rapport, a few about maybe their business, and then a few sprinkled throughout the deck, and then even maybe a few at the end. But you don't want to have too many questions, and you don't want to bunch them up so the person doesn't feel like they're under attack or in an interrogation. You want it to feel like a fun, friendly dialogue where you're educating somebody about how your company can help theirs grow. Okay, after the questions, you're going to add intentional pauses. Intentional pauses. What do you mean by a planned pause or an intentional pause? Well, again, you want it to seem conversational versus you regurgitating a script. And by pausing throughout the presentation, you're able to accomplish that. But intentional pauses actually do a few other powerful things. For one, it allows you to make them elicit information about their company after a planned pause. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do this in a moment, but there are just certain ways that you can lever the power of silence to get information out of a partner. Additionally, planned pauses sometimes can coax partners to verbally confirm beliefs that you want them to possess. So let's dive into these a little bit more. In order to understand how pauses can do this, we have to understand silence for a second. Generally, a lot of people are just afraid or uncomfortable with silence, especially with complete strangers. When they encounter it, they'll often either say what they're thinking or confirm whatever it is you want them to, just to avoid and break the silence. Thus, silence can be used to, again, derive information or coax confirmation. And I call this information mining with silence. So how to do this is basically, number one, define the information that you want to know. So an example would be, do they have budget for your product? And then what you're going to do is basically make a grand leading statement that has to do with that information, followed by an abrupt silence. So if I wanted to know about whether somebody had budget for my products, I might say something like, our partners have been so happy with our offering, they can't believe that they get all of this for only $5,000. Silence. And then basically you wait for a response. And typically that person is going to say exactly what they're thinking. So they might say, $5,000, huh? It's not in our budget. Or they could say, $5,000, that's it? That's great. The bottom line is by using silence and waiting for the response, you get the information that you want without the awkwardness or confrontation of a direct ask. And again, this is because people are generally afraid or uncomfortable with silence, so they break it by saying what they're thinking. Now, let's talk about coaxing confirmation with silence. What I mean by this is you can essentially inspire verbal confirmation from your prospect for a belief that you're advocating for. So an example would be how amazing your product is. And again, the way to do this is make a grand leading statement that is related to that belief, followed by an abrupt silence. So let's look at an example. You might say something like, our product has increased user signups 3 times for company-wide implementation, and we just think that's absolutely awesome. Silence. Now, at this point, the prospect is many times going to confirm this belief. Maybe saying something like, wow, that's great. That's impressive. Whatever it is, all of a sudden, this person has just verbally indicated that whatever belief that you wanted them to have, whether it's how amazing your product is, how awesome another result was for another company, they've just confirmed that, which has a very powerful effect in their own evaluation of a prospective partnership. Okay, so after you've added some intentional pauses in order to coax confirmation as well as derive information or information mine, your next step is to practice this. You don't want to go in cold, so what you need to do is find somebody from your company to practice with a few times and even get some feedback from on how it can be improved. Now, when you do this, you can just do it very casually, but what I recommend is doing it as exactly as if you were doing it with a prospect. So that means getting in front of your computer, doing a screen share, and picking up the phone and calling somebody in a different room. You want to simulate this as close to as possible as what an actual pitch will be like with a partner. And that way, when you go and actually do the pitch, you'll be comfortable because you've been in that situation before. After you've nailed the pitch 3 to 4 times with your practice partner, I'd say that you're ready to go ahead and do the real thing.